Welcome to our Strength for Menopause video, where we will unlock the power of strength training for women navigating this stage. Menopause brings unique challenges, and we're here to equip you with the tools to address them with the right exercises. Whether you're a novice or a seasoned pro, we'll work our way through 5 exercises tailored for pre, peri, and postmenopausal women. We'll also dive into this one thing to do with your bones that you're losing at a progressive rate, and that should actually be scaring you. Before we dive into this, let's just set everything straight. So make sure that you have done some form of strength training before you dive into these exercises. Most importantly, technique is absolutely key. Dev is going to show me how to do all the different techniques, and that is really to ensure that you don't get injured. If you have never done these kind of exercises before, start with 0 weight and build yourself up from there.
So the first exercise we're going to address today is a squat. Now there are many variations of a squat. We're going to start off with the basic technique, and this basic technique is actually standard across any variation and progression of a squat. So the starting point of the squat, foot position wise, is starting with your feet shoulder width apart. You could actually have your feet slightly wider apart, especially if you struggle with poor ankle and hip mobility. This will just allow for a little bit better range of motion. So feet are shoulder width apart. When you are doing the squat, it is also important that your knees track in the same line as your toes and not necessarily diving with your knees diving in or outwards. Key here is shoulders, pull your shoulders back and your chest out. So you really want to try and keep a nice tall upper body and a tall torso. The squat movement is bending at the knees and at the hips, really driving the bum and the hips backwards. As you're going down into the squat, you'll see Shona is looking up at the wall ahead of her and then standing back up with power through the heels. What we mean by that is keeping your heels really anchored into the floor. As a little cheat code, you could curl your toes up ever so slightly just to feel the weight distribution into your heels when you are going down into that squat. Very key here, and a common error we tend to find is weight falling forward. So you'll see Shona now giving a demonstration of that where she's not bending enough at the knees. Her weight wants to fall forward and she's almost leaning on her toes quite a bit. Your head is quite heavy. Use your head as a guideline. So your head should be looking directly in front of you, not down at your feet. Shoulders back, deep into that squat and standing up nice and tall. Really almost trying to keep your upper body upright. The squat is pivotal for hamstring strength, quad strength, as well as glute strength, which are primary movers in any running style you might have. Once you have mastered a bodyweight squat from a technique point of view, the progression can then be adding some weights. I'm going to give you a demonstration now with using, Shona's got some dumbbells with her. Again, technique is vital. So that baseline technique that we've been through with a bodyweight squat, exactly the same thing. You'll see Shona is holding the weights up in front of her. If you tend to have your weight in front of you and you do struggle with falling forward, it does round your upper back quite a lot. And if you struggle with knee pain in particular, this is a front squat progression and could hurt with a little bit of knee pain. If you do struggle with that, put the weight on your shoulders, as Shona's done now, really opening the chest up and almost imagine squeezing your shoulder blades together. Going into that movement now, down into the same technique and driving back up. All Shona has done here is added resistance as a progression to the squat. So down, still keeping the back upright, looking up ahead of you, now with a little bit more weight as a progression.
Not doing that.
Yeah. The second exercise we're going to focus on is a straight leg deadlift. Unlike the squat where we are bending at the knees, this is more of a hinging action at the hips. So I'm not going to get Shona to do the full movement yet, just asked to show the hinge. So that's where the bend is happening at the hip and not as much as at the knee. Front on, feet are shoulder width apart for this one. This one is quite important. You don't need so much mobility around the ankle, so you don't want to be getting your feet wide apart. Feet are shoulder width apart for this. Key here is that you aren't, as much as this is called a straight leg deadlift, you are not completely straightening and locking out at the knees. Soft knees, you want to just bend the knee, so a slight angle in the knee, And that angle at the knee stays like that through the entire movement. So no further bending at the knees. You'll see Shona's got her hands across her chest. Key here, and the reason for that, is we are trying to again get your chest out and pull your shoulders back. Through any of these standing type movements, we really want to focus on getting a good, tall, strong torso and not slouching and rounding at the upper back. So hands across your chest, squeeze those shoulder blades together. The hinge movement, so push your bum backwards, looking up ahead of you, and the hinging at the hip. You will generally get to a position where you feel your hamstrings pulling. If you've got really tight hamstrings, you might not get to this full range of motion. And then from there, key would be to stand up nice and straight and drive the hips forward. You don't want to be hinging and coming up and finishing in half a movement. Focus on really extending in the stand-up, hips forward, and at this stage, you can actually straighten your knees. For the next rep would be again, unlock the knees, drive the bum backwards, looking up ahead of you and coming back up. When we talk again about the shoulder position and a nice flat back, you can see how flat Shona's back is here, and she's not rounding and slouching at the upper back. If you do have tight hamstrings and you do often try and get too low, that's where the rounding at the upper back happens. As a progression to the straight leg deadlift, you'll see, again, adding resistance. We've given Shona a weight here. Key here is, again, to make sure shoulders are back, chest driving out, and nice straight arms. We often find that as soon as someone does this movement with weight, is they tend to pull the weight up towards your chest. Keep your arms nice and straight. We're going to go back down into this movement. And again, Shona's arms stay straight the whole way through. That is her limit in this movement. Her shoulders are still back and driving up forward. With adding weight, this is a relatively heavy weight. You are always going to be better off doing this movement with body weight before weights, and even continue just doing body weights. It can put a lot of strain on the lower back. So absolutely vital that if you struggle with any back pain or you're a little bit tight and you feel that this might tweak the back a little bit, put the weight down and go back into doing a standard body weight movement. Just to show the side view on this, and another key tip is as Shona comes down, you'll see Shona's arms are just hanging, almost letting gravity do the work in terms of where the weight hangs. A common error or common mistake is someone driving the weight out in front of them. The heavier that weight gets, the harder that is to do and the more strain it is putting on the back. So just let gravity do the work, let the weight hang straight down, almost along Shona's shins, and then standing up nice and tall, hips forward into that strong body position again. The third exercise we're going to do is a shoulder press. Now, as a runner, you might be asking, why am I doing shoulder exercises and shoulder presses when I run? Key here is, as a female over the age of 45, you are losing bone mineral density at an exponential rate. It's quite a scary thought. As a runner, however, there is a lot of impact on your lower legs, and as a result, gaining quite a lot of strength work and impact and building that bone mineral density. We often, though, neglect our upper body, and this is why we bring in upper body exercises into the strength routine so that we keep focusing on slowing down that degeneration of bone mineral density. Okay, so let's get started with the shoulder press. For this, I'm actually going to ask Shona to kneel on one knee. So this is what we call a half kneeling position. The reason I like to do this is so that we focus here on not arching the lower back when we are doing the press exercise. Especially when you do progress to a little bit more weight, common mistake is driving the hips forward and actually hyperextending the lower back. So half kneeling, you'll see 90-degree angles on both knees. Again, shoulders back, chest out. Shona's going to use some light weights here to start, and you're welcome to start this exercise with light weights. And I'm actually going to ask you or emphasize light weights. In this position, shoulders or elbows are out, shoulders are back, and from here, pushing the weight straight up. So imagine you are up against the wall and you want that weight coming up and your arms next to your ears, not pushing out in front of you. All right. From there, still keeping the shoulder blades squeezing together, and again, coming down. You don't have to come so low that your elbows touch the side of your body. Keep a nice strong wrist. Press up, tall above your head, arms next to your ears, and coming back down to sort of a 90-degree angle on the elbows. Again, looking at focusing on pushing the hips forward, so don't want the hips slouching back, but not hyperextending at the lower back as well. I'm going to ask you to do one more rep, coming up nice and strong. You can almost have your hands touching above your head and come back down, keeping a strong position. If you are doing 10 reps, for example, what you can do is you can do 5 with your left leg forward and then 5 with your right leg forward. So just alternating which side is the front dominant strong leg, and that's also just going to help with a little bit of stability at the same time. For the next exercise, sticking with upper body exercises, we are going to do a bent over row. Now, bent over row is also a really great exercise for body posture. Again, starting off with feet shoulder width apart to get a nice strong base. We've already discussed a hip hinging action, and this is going to be a static hinging action. So Shona is again going to come down. You'll see the slight relaxed bent in her knee, hinging at the hip, and that body position is where Shona is comfortable. Her hamstrings aren't pulling too much. The rowing action, using some light weights to start. Again, you'll see gravity doing the work. The weight is directly down. With the rowing action, the start of the movement is actually out of the shoulder. So Shona is going to pull her shoulders up and then high elbows, almost looking to get the weight or your hands underneath your armpit and then extending straight back down. There's no movement on the upper body. So it's not a case of standing up every time you do this. And that's usually also going to happen if your weight is too heavy. So starting off with really light weights in a nice hinging position, actually looking up ahead of you slightly, so it does help keep the back, but not too much that you are flexing at the neck. So a nice neutral neck and back position, weights hanging in a starting position, and then from the shoulder, high row. I want your elbows coming up along your body or rubbing up against the body, hands under the armpit, and extend fully down. You're going to the next rep without moving any of the main structural positions. Just in this, a couple of common mistakes and something to stay away from. When you've done your rowing action and you come back down, important that you're not trying to get too low and rounding at the upper back as Shona is doing now. Still pushing the chest out, nice flat back, and extend. You can extend out the shoulder, but don't round the upper back and slouch over. Another mistake, facing head on, is in that bent over position. I mentioned high elbows. A common mistake is keeping the elbows stationary and just bringing the weights up to your chest. That's not a rowing action. The rowing action has to happen out the shoulder, high elbows, and then extend back down. For the last exercise, we're going to focus on what we call a dead bug. You'll see Shona's lying on the ground. She's not just lying down on the job. She's here for a particular reason. So with the dead bug, first thing we want to do is elevate the feet that your knees are at 90 degrees. The arms are straight up ahead of her, facing towards the roof. This is your starting position, and this exercise does take a little bit of coordination. It's a really good exercise for mobility, overall mobility, as well as good core strength. So keeping a good squared off position, opposite arm and opposite leg. In this exercise, we want to start off by really engaging the core properly. So a key tip here is to almost pull your belly button down towards the floor so you feel the lower back flatten against the ground and not arching. You'll actually see as Shona did that, there's a little bit of almost rotation in her hips as well. So really anchor or belly button down so we're activating the core. Then we're going to go right hand and left leg will extend at the same time. I'm going to ask you to hold it there, keeping the left hand still pointing up towards the roof at a starting point and the right leg or knee pointing up towards the roof. Coming back up to the starting position and then rotating or alternating sides, right hand, left leg extend and coming back up. We're really trying to focus on long extensions here. So get the arm nice and straight behind the head and the leg nice and straight out in front of you without arching that lower back. So keep activating at the core. And also key here is as Shona's doing these, you can carry on. Not to drop your foot. A common mistake is you drop your foot towards your bum because you're trying to think of so many different coordination movements. Keep the foot elevated. Keep the one hand and one knee always pointing up. Imagine a piece of rope pulling your hand up towards the roof and alternating sides in a continuous fashion, keeping that core active throughout the movement. A key tip here in terms of coordination in particular is slow the movements down. I often find that when you are trying to rush through this exercise, and most people do because it gets a little bit tough, but if you're rushing through the exercise, your coordination is all over the show. So one hand's moving forward while the other one's moving back. You want to try and keep nice and slow, nice and controlled helps with getting that coordination done properly. From here, we're going to move into a progression. So this is what we call an isometric dead bug hold. So exactly the same starting position. All right, core active, pull that belly button down towards the spine. For the isometric hold, you're going to take your left hand and place it on your right knee and almost have your left hand pushing your knee away from you and your right knee pulling back towards your head. So they're resisting against each other. While the resistance on opposite hand, opposite leg, the right hand and left leg is still then doing the extension and coming back to zero. You can then alternate sides if you'd like, or do all reps on one side to finish. So in this case, alternating, extend the opposite arm, opposite leg, but remember the hand that's on the knee has to be under resistance at all times. So that is what we call an isometric hold or an isometric contraction. Knowing these 5 exercises is one thing, but making sure they complement the rest of your training is another. To find out how to practically implement the strength work in your weekly training, click on the link on screen to save your seat in Shona's upcoming free web class, where she will show you exactly how to do it. You'll also learn how to recover from sessions quicker so you don't feel tired all the time. That way, you can keep running better to, through, and long after menopause.